Okay, this week's Ask Energy question is a great one because it is so current these days because it is blowing up everywhere right now. And that is the high, or let's just say super high, carbohydrate feedings per hour during training and racing. Okay, so when I say super high, I mean over 90 grams an hour. So let me unpack this. So the question really is, should I follow a high super high, greater than 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour, carbohydrate feeding plan during my training, during my racing? Do I need that? Okay, let's unpack that. So, way long time ago, the range of carbohydrate intake per hour during training and racing was provided to us from research, and that range was 30 to 60 grams per hour. So, back in the days, we used to always recommend, based on research, that we should consume, or athletes should consume, 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Great. Okay. And then probably the early 2000s, right around early 2000s, 2004, I think it was, maybe to 2010, 2011-ish, a lot of research started to come out regarding different receptors on the small intestine that carried glucose and fructose across the small intestine for absorption. Okay, so then around that time actually came, to my knowledge, the first product to actually hit the market that utilized both glucose and fructose absorption, or kind of lock and key, if you will, the pathways across the small intestine, was Power Bar with their C2 Max. So that was actually based on Asker Ukendroop's work and his research, kind of with these different receptors that are on the small intestine when he found these. Now, okay, follow along here. So in the past, the research said we should consume 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour during training or racing. Okay. Then new research came along and said, actually, we have these two transport mechanisms, these receptors on the small intestine, one for glucose and simple sugars, monosaccharides, and the other for fructose. And then the thought was, oh, well, now we can actually feed more because we can, if we have dual carbohydrate sources in terms of a glucose or a simple sugar that turns into glucose, it's metabolized into glucose, and a fructose, we can actually get both of these across the small intestine in greater amounts. Think of it like two school buses carrying kids, right? One school bus you can only max out with a certain amount of kids, but if you get another one, you can add more kids, right? So this is kind of what the research told us back then, and now since then, all of this research has been blowing up. Athletes have been using all of this stuff to really try to gain a competitive advantage with all this high carb feeding. Now, let me just back up one quick second. After Dr. Ukendroop's research came out, a few years after that, it took a while, but then the research actually bumped into the real life recommendations, if you will. And instead of 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate recommended per hour, it became 30 to 90 grams because of these dual transport mechanisms across the small intestine, glucose, fructose, right? So now here we are in the world of what we recommend typically for athletes is consuming between 30 and 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour of activity. Obviously, that's a huge range, right? And we're not going to get into that part of it. But the question begs, should you follow a super high carbohydrate feeding strategy during train or for training and racing? Well, here's the deal. You can actually, if you need to consume 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour or less, you can do that through just a one sugar carbohydrate, such as glucose, maltodextrin. You don't need fructose. It's just when you need more than 60 grams, so 61 grams and more, you actually need fructose in there to try to increase the absorption rate because, again, the two channels, if you will, right? So if it's anything between 30 and 60 grams per hour that you need, don't worry about dual sugars, right? Glucose, maltodextrin, totally fine. Okay. If you need between 61 and 90 grams, okay, now you do need to start using the two different sugars for sure, right? Fructose and then a glucose based or maltodextrin based. But now the question becomes, this super high carb feeding is over 90 grams. So now we're seeing a lot of athletes play with the 90, even up to 150, 180 I've seen in some professional triathletes doing Ironman racing. So now they're taking kind of what our range was or is 30 to 90 grams per hour. and they're expounding that. They're trying to even double it sometimes, right? So what gives? Do you need to do this? Okay, let me unpack this a little bit before I answer this question. There isn't actually much research on this at all as I'm recording this today. Okay, so what we know is most of the research has been done in elite or professional athletes. And in addition to that, when we look at that, who's doing it in real life? It's professional elite athletes, typically endurance athletes. This is their job. This is how they survive, right? So we also know that elite athletes, professional athletes, have a little bit different carbohydrate metabolism, so they can actually they're a little more efficient in utilizing carbohydrates. So they have that for them, right? What about the recreational person? What about you and me? Should we go above 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour? I'm not quite sure. I would say this. The reason for going above 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour is a competitive advantage, right? To supply your body with continuous energy and a lot of it from carbohydrates. Depending on your level of competitiveness and your I guess, level of GI distress if you've ever had it. If you don't have it, you've never had it, congratulations, that's fantastic. But if you've ever had GI distress, which by the way, 30 to 90% of endurance athletes have had or continue to have GI distress, if you're in that category, you probably shouldn't overfeed carbohydrates greater than 90 grams an hour unless you do some gut training, which I'll talk about in the future Ask Energy because I'm sure someone will ask about that, right? What about gut training? So let's go back to the story. If you are a recreational athlete and your competitive level is, competitive, but you're not trying to win money, you're not trying to win all these races, right? You're competing for fun. And yes, you are a little competitive, but it's not like your thing, right? This isn't your livelihood, right? I would argue that you probably do not need more than 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Now, maybe if you want to play with it, right? Because I see a lot of age groupers, a lot of recreational athletes, endurance athletes actually kind of pushing the 80, 90, and they're questioning, I wonder if I could go higher. Listen, if you want to go higher, you can, right? But just remember, it may cause GI distress if you do not follow a structured gut training protocol. But back to the question, do I need to follow a super high carbohydrate, which I define higher than the normal research that we're providing right now in terms of our layperson recommendations, higher than 90 grams per hour for the recreational athlete? I do not think you do. Now, could there be a few N of ones out there, recreational athletes, not professional, not elite, but recreational athletes that may benefit from consuming over 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour? Perhaps, maybe, right? But I just think most of recreational athletes, myself included, will fall into the bell-shaped curve and not be those outliers. Now, with all of that said, I'm not anti high carb feedings. I'm not pro anti carb feedings. I am making sure that you are doing what you need for your body to satisfy your performance goals, right? But also your health goals. Don't forget about your health goals, right? Because a lot of this too, which I'll leave you with, since I've answered the question, probably not. You probably don't need this if you are a recreational athlete who does not do this for a living. Even if you are competitive, you may not need more than 90 grams of carbs per hour. What I will say this though, if you're trying to explore this high carb feeding in training and racing, please follow a gut training protocol. The last thing you want to do is just from day one to day two, increase your carbohydrates per hour during training by 30, 40, 50, 60 grams. You don't want to do that, right? Your body will most likely freak out and cause some type of GI distress. So that's why gut training protocols have been in place. Now, I'll just hint on this. There are no gut training protocols that have actually been validated in research. It's more real life. There's a lot of athletes. I actually just read an article about Ironman, professional athletes doing Ironman, males specifically, and a lot of the tinkering that they're doing, I read in this article, is amazing. I mean, they're doing metabolic efficiency testing to see how many grams of carb and fat they're burning. They're doing lactate testing. They're really fine tuning it. It's literally an experiment N of one. So if you are thinking of this, then please reach out to a qualified sport dietitian to help you with a gut training protocol. Okay, but I'm not going to answer that one yet because nobody's asked me about gut training just yet. So if you want to ask me a question, link below. Just click that link. You can submit any question you want me to answer. Every week, I will put these out with myself and my sport dietitian staff at eNRG Performance. So appreciate you watching. Thank you.